No, seriously. Did you feel it? That subtle shift in the air, that strange ringing in your ear, that chill running down your spine even though the room is warm. That's not your imagination. That's not coincidence. That is a warning. A signal. A whisper from the unseen world trying to break through your everyday distractions. Because what if I told you certain sounds? Yes, sounds are spiritual alerts, coded messages, alarms from the universe. And when a witch is near, those sounds get louder, more precise, more persistent. The question is, are you awake enough to hear them? See, we live in a world addicted to noise but deaf to meaning. You hear birds, footsteps, the wind. Mundane, forgettable. But ancient traditions, intuitive cultures, and even science agree on one thing: your body, your mind, your spirit. They respond to sound long before logic catches up. If you're not listening, you're already vulnerable. And when a witch draws near, whether physical or spiritual, your senses warn you, not with screams, not with flashing lights, but with the eerie, the odd, the unexplainable. So let's talk about the 8 sounds that aren't just strange. They're spiritual sirens, and if you've been hearing them, it may already be too late. The first, ringing in the ears, not the medical kind. I'm talking about those sudden high-pitched tones that come out of nowhere. The ones you feel more than you hear. Those moments when the world seems to muffle and a sharp tone pierces your reality like a needle through silk. That is not random. That is a frequency shift. It's the energy field around you trying to recalibrate because something foreign, something uninvited has entered your space. And often, that something has a dark agent masked in charm, power, or beauty. Then there's the sound of whispering, but no one's there. You walk into a room and swear you heard a voice. You turn around and it's silence. Maybe it even sounds like your name, but it disappears as fast as it came. That's a trick of the witching presence. Testing your awareness, seeking your attention, probing for your fear. You dismiss it. You just gave it permission to stay. You acknowledge it. Now the game begins. Number 3. Scratching. You hear it on the walls, under your bed, maybe even inside the closet. You tell yourself it's the pipes, the house settling, the dog. But deep down, your gut knows better. That's not the house. That's not your imagination. That's energy trying to claw its way into your dimension. Especially at 3 a.m., the witching hour, when the veil is thinnest and you are most exposed. And how about this one? Bells. Chimes that move when there's no wind. A single ding when no one's around. Bells have been used for centuries to banish dark energy. But what happens when they ring on their own? That's not a charm, it's a challenge. A witch in the vicinity is provoking the space, testing the boundaries, watching how you react. Or maybe it's footsteps. You're home alone. You know you're alone. Yet you hear the faint, deliberate patter of movement. Not running, not chaotic. Calm, steady, like it owns the place. Because that's what this kind of presence does. It makes itself comfortable before you even realize it's invaded your home, your energy, your thoughts. And here's one: people ignore the mosting animals making unnatural sounds. Your dog growls at the corner of the room. Your cat hisses at nothing. The birds outside stop singing all at once. We write it off. But animals hear what we can't. They sense what we deny. When they react violently or fall eerily silent, it's not without reason. Nature doesn't perform. It warns. That's not instinct. That's intelligence. Another one. The sudden echo of your own voice. You speak. And it bounces back wrong, delayed, distant, like you're not the only one in the conversation. That distortion. That's spiritual interference. That's presence. A witch nearby isn't always cloaked in robes or flying on brooms. Sometimes it's an energy force that alters sound, manipulates the air, hijacks your vibration. You're not just being heard. You're being studied. And thing the 8th, and the most dangerous: silence. But not just any silence. The kind that drops heavy. The kind that presses on your chest like invisible weight. You walk into a place, and everything feels off. The birds stop. The hum of life pauses. Your breathing sounds louder than usual. That's not peace. That's presence. When everything goes still, it means something else has taken control. Something ancient. Something calculating. And if you're not paying attention, you'll confuse that silence for calm, when really, it's the calm before your spiritual storm. You know what most people do when they suddenly hear ringing in their ears. They brush it off. They blame it on stress, dehydration, maybe too much caffeine. But let me ask you this. What if it's not physical? What if it's spiritual? What if that high-pitched tone that came out of nowhere wasn't just a glitch in your body, but a message from something beyond your physical senses? That's not a symptom. That's a signal. A subtle, coded warning from your environment, your intuition, your spirit. Because when a witch draws near, when any dark, manipulative energy tries to enter your field, the frequency around you changes, and you feel it first through sound. See, your ears are not just for listening to voices. They're instruments. They pick up shifts, vibrations, frequencies that most people are too distracted to notice. So when you hear that sharp tone slicing through your awareness, and everything else goes muffled like the world took a step back, it's not random. That's your body alerting you before your mind catches up. And what you do in that moment matters. You can ignore it, numb it, explain it away like most people dog, or you can pause. Get still. Acknowledge what just shifted. Because here's the truth: dark energy doesn't always announce itself with drama. It doesn't crash through your door. Sometimes, it slides in quietly. It tests the space. It observes. It tries to sync with your energy unnoticed. But your nervous system knows better. Your intuition catches the breach first. And that ringing, those few seconds of uncomfortable silence followed by piercing tone, is your red flag. A witch doesn't always need a face. Sometimes it's an influence, a person, a force, a thought pattern. But it always disturbs the frequency when it enters. So next time that ring hits your ear out of nowhere, don't just shake it off. Ask yourself, what just changed around me? What or who just entered my space? Your awareness is your weapon. If you're alert, you're already harder to reach. You're already becoming untouchable. There's a moment that stops you cold. You walk into a room and for a split second, just one, you swear you heard someone speak. Maybe it was your name. Maybe it was a whisper so soft, so fast, it vanished the second you turned around. And what do? You shake it off. You blame the wind, the hallway, your imagination. But you know deep down, something wasn't right. That's not paranoia. That's presence. That's a spiritual force testing your awareness, seeing if you'll notice it or ignore. Whispers are the preferred tactic of manipulation. They don't demand. They suggest. They creep in through your comfort. They mimic the familiar. Because that's what darkness does. It doesn't shout. It doesn't always come through chaos. Sometimes it enters as a soft voice just behind your ear, catching you when you're tired, alone, or mentally scattered. And if you don't confront it, it escalates. Not because it's powerful, but because you gave it permission by pretending it wasn't real. When a witch is near, when an energy built on deception, control, and spiritual distortion is present, it announces itself in the most subtle ways. Whispers that have no source are not just weird. They're intentional. They're a spiritual tap on your shoulder, and if you respond with fear, with curiosity, or worst of all, silence, you give it space to stay. These whispers aren't just trying to scare you. They're reading you, gauging your strength. They want to know, are you self-possessed, or are you open to influence? Most people have had this experience and never talked about it, because they're afraid of being labeled crazy. But ignoring the unseen doesn't make you safer. It makes you accessible. Your intuition is warning you through sound. A voice you didn't invite. A sound that doesn't belong. That's the moment you stop, ground yourself, and speak power into the space around you. You don't negotiate with it. You confront it. You declare this is not your ground. Because if you let those whispers pass unchecked, they turn into thoughts. And those thoughts, if not protected, can be guided. You want to keep your power. Then, when something tries to get into your head without permission, you better be the kind of person who doesn't flinch, doesn't apologize, and doesn't stay silent. You ever lay in bed at night and hear something? Not loud, not obvious, just a soft scratching. Maybe on the wall, under your bed, inside your closet. You sit up, listen again, silence. But then it starts again. Subtle, repeating, like something's trying to get your attention. Or worse, get in. And your mind races trying to rationalize it. Maybe it's the pipes. Maybe it's the house settling. Maybe it's nothing. But here's the thing: deep down, you know better. You felt it before you even heard it. That tightness in your chest. That shift in energy. That instinct that says something doesn't belong here. Scratching is not innocent when it's rhythmic, targeted, and timed around your vulnerability. Especially between 2 and 4 a.m., What so many call the witching hour, that's not a Hollywood myth. That's an ancient truth. It's when spiritual veils are thinner. It's when negative energy moves more freely, probing for weak spots. And what do most people do? They roll over, they deny, they numb out. And that's exactly what that presence wants. Your dismissal. Because once you ignore a spiritual breach, it becomes bolder. A witch doesn't have to look like the fairy tale villain to show up in your space. Sometimes she arrives as a force, a spiritual parasite, a dark entity that's feeding off your fear, your attention, your avoidance. That scratching, it's not random. It's a request for access, a test, a knock at your energetic door. And the moment you start saying, "It's probably nothing," is the moment you start handing over your authority in your own home. You need to understand, sound is vibration, and vibration is how energy moves. So when something is physically scratching at your space, it's trying to disrupt your field. It's seeking a reaction. If you get scared, it gains power. If you go numb, it gains ground. But if you rise, if you claim your space and confront what's trying to sneak in quietly, you break the cycle. You don't need to see it to fight it. You just need to stop pretending it's not real. Power doesn't just come from confidence. It comes from clarity. From recognizing when the ordinary has turned spiritual. From knowing that the moment you hear the unnatural, you have a choice: ignore it and invite chaos, or face it and shut it down. Most people won't. But you're not most people. You don't need a light on. You don't need backup. What you need is your voice, your command, your presence. That's scratching, that's a warning. But you are the answer. There's something about the sound of a bell that cuts through everything. It's sharp, pure, ancient. It's one of the oldest tools humans have used to clear energy, to shift spiritual environments. Monasteries use them. Temples use them. Even in battle, bells were used to declare presence, to cleanse, to awaken. So what does it mean when a bell rings, and no one touched it? When a wind chime sings, but there's no wind? When a single ding echoes through your space, and you're the only one home? That is not charm. That is not coincidence. That is a direct challenge. You need to understand, sound isn't just heard, it's felt. It carries energy. And bells, they hold power, which is exactly why dark forces react to them. When a witch is near, when a manipulative, controlling, energetic presence starts to invade, bells react. They shift, they warn. They vibrate with disruption because they are wired to disturb what doesn't belong. And if a bell rings on its own, you are not alone. Something is present, and it's responding to the spiritual charge in that sound. This isn't about being dramatic, it's about being aware. A bell isn't just an object, it's a frequency interrupter. It clears static, it shakes off energy that's trying to hide. So when it goes off without any natural trigger, ask yourself what just got disturbed. Because something did. And when you ignore it, when you chalk it up to weird, you're ignoring your first layer of defense. You're silencing the exact thing trying to alert you. The presence of a witch doesn't always show up in some physical form. It can be subtle, insidious. It can creep in through people, situations, even emotions you can't quite explain. But when that presence gets too close, bells don't lie. They sing. They expose. And if you're not paying attention, if you're too distracted to notice, you lose the advantage. You lose the upper hand before you even realize you're in a spiritual war. You don't need to live in fear, but you better not live in ignorance. If that bell rings, don't just listen, respond, reset your space, stand up, speak up, call back your energy, because in that moment, the atmosphere is shifting, and you get to decide who stays and who doesn't. Energy respects power, and power begins when you stop explaining away the signs and start honoring them. You ever hear footsteps when no one's there? And I don't mean the clumsy kind, not running, not chaotic. No, I'm talking about deliberate, slow, calm, like whoever, or whatever. It is already knows they don't need to rush, like they belong. That's the sound of confidence, and that's exactly what makes it dangerous. Because when a witch is near, when a spiritual force enters your domain, it doesn't always come in with a bang. It slips in with the calm certainty of something that knows it's done this before. It moves with purpose, and it waits for you to doubt your instincts. You're home alone, the floor creaks, you freeze, you listen, one footstep, then another, maybe upstairs, maybe just outside your door. But there's no one there. You check, you wait, nothing. But deep down, your gut's already gone tight. Your skin knows something's off before your mind even gets involved. That's the body responding to spiritual intrusion. Don't brush that off. Don't rationalize it. That's not your house settling. That's a presence making itself known. See, when something is walking around your space, physically or spiritually, it's a claim, a declaration. It's saying, I'm here, and I want to see what you'll do about it. And if you do nothing, if you let fear freeze you or denial lull you into inaction, you've already surrendered ground. But when you rise, when you confront it with your presence, your voice, your authority, you interrupt its game. That sound of footsteps in an empty space isn't just spooky, it's strategic. That's energy trying to see if you'll let it in. If you're too tired, too distracted, too weak to notice, and when it knows you're not paying attention, that's when it starts to end. Not just in your home, but in your thoughts, your relationships, your peace. You have to understand, energy doesn't need a body to walk. It doesn't need shoes to step. What it needs is access, and sound is one of the first ways it announces its entrance. So when you hear those footsteps, slow, steady, wrong, don't just freeze. Center yourself. Take command. That's your cue to show up in your own life, to declare that your space, physical or spiritual, is not open to anything that doesn't serve your highest good. Witches don't always knock. Sometimes they just start walking. The question is, do you notice? And more importantly, what do you do when you do? Because ignoring it doesn't protect you. But facing it, that's where the power shifts. Animals don't fake reactions. They don't second-guess themselves. They don't wait for evidence or permission to respond to something that feels off. They just know. So when your dog suddenly starts growling at a corner where there's nothing, when your cat stares wide-eyed into an empty hallway and refuses to move, when the birds outside your window all go silent at once, that is not a coincidence. That is a message. And if you're smart, if you're grounded, you'll listen to what they're not saying out loud. Animals operate on instinct, pure awareness. They're tapped into the energy field long before you consciously register that something's wrong. They pick up on the subtle shifts, the kind that can't be measured or explained. And when a witch is near, when a dark or manipulative force starts creeping into your environment, they feel it, not as fear, but as threat. And they respond the way nature designed them, tog with alertness, aggression, or withdrawal. You see it all the time. People shushing their dog, brushing off the hiss of a cat, laughing when their pet refuses to go into a room. But animals don't perform, they react. And when you ignore those reactions, you're ignoring one of your oldest allies, one of the most ancient warning systems you've been gifted. Animals have protected their packs for thousands of years, not with words, but with behavior. That sudden tension in your dog's body, that low, steady growl, that's not anxiety, that's a warning. Because when spiritual energy changes, when something dark tries to embed itself, it doesn't just affect humans. It disturbs the whole environment. And animals are tuned into those frequencies more honestly than we are. They're not distracted by screens, deadlines, or overthinking. They don't rationalize the unnatural. They feel it. They respond to it. They try to warn you. But here's where the real mistake happens. You ignore them. You talk over the bark. You dismiss the reaction. You move forward into a space they wouldn't dare enter. And in doing so, you silence the exact intuition you should be following. You make your energy more accessible to whatever presence is testing your boundaries. And trust me, those entities, those dark forces, those witch-like influences, they watch how you respond to what your animals already see. If you dismiss it, you've just opened a door. So don't laugh it off. Don't rush to explain it away. When your animal reacts, get curious, get grounded, look around. Because while your animal might not speak your language, it's speaking truth. And in a world full of manipulation and spiritual noise, that kind of clarity is power. Use it. Honor it. Trust it. Because they're not just your pets. They're your early warning system. And they've been trying to tell you something you've been too busy to hear. You ever say something out loud, and for a split second, your own voice doesn't sound right. Like it echoes back to you but not the way it should. Off-tempo, distant, hollow. You speak, but what returns doesn't feel like you. It feels interrupted, distorted. Like there's something else in the space catching it, holding it, shifting it before it comes back to your ears. And most people don't think twice about it. They keep talking, they brush it off. They laugh, maybe look around, and move on. But what you just experienced isn't bad acoustics. It's not the room, it's not a glitch, it's interference, it's disruption, it's a spiritual hijack in real time. When a witch is near, when an unseen force with intention, power, and manipulation begins to creep into your space, it doesn't always announce itself in grand gestures. It doesn't always slam doors or throw shadows across your walls. Sometimes it starts with the smallest shift in vibration, and sound is vibration. Words are energy. Your voice is one of your most powerful tools. It commands, it sets energetic tone. So when that gets distorted, when something feels off in your own speech, it means something is trying to manipulate the very frequency you're operating on. This isn't fantasy. This is physics. Everything is energy. Every word carries a vibration. And when dark energy, or the presence of a witch-like force, enters your field, it alters the frequency of the space without your permission. And your voice is often the first place that shift shows up. Not because you're saying anything wrong, but because what you're saying is being bent, twisted, dampened by something that doesn't belong. And your body knows. Your soul knows. You feel it before you understand it. You know what your voice is supposed to sound like, and when that changes, even slightly, that is not something to ignore. Now, the thing is, most people talk without listening. They speak to fill space, not to claim it. But if you were trained, if you were taught like I was, you'd know that when your voice doesn't bounce back clean, someone else is in that room with you. Someone, or something, is absorbing it, filtering it, trying to shape what you say, or more importantly, how it's received. That's not just spooky. That's tactical. That's control. Because what better way to weaken a person than to scramble their ability to declare, to lead, to command their space? Let's break it down. You walk into a room. It's quiet. You speak a word, maybe just to yourself, and there's a weird delay, an unnatural echo. It's subtle, but enough to make you pause. That pause. That's your intuition throwing the brakes on. That's your nervous system screaming, something's here. And if you ignore it, if you keep going like nothing's wrong, you're doing exactly what that force wants, allowing it to blend into your awareness undetected. Because that's the tactic of the manipulative spirit, of the witch energy. It doesn't always fight you head on. It doesn't need to. It plays with your reality. It alters just enough of your environment to make you question your own perception. And the minute you doubt yourself, the minute you second guess what you just heard, what you just felt, you lose ground. That's how spiritual forces work. They don't always overpower you, they dismantle you bit by bit. And if you're not paying attention, they'll make you believe you're the one falling apart. Your voice is not just sound, it's alignment. When your words come out strong, clear, with conviction, that's power, that's control, that's spiritual protection in action. And anything that disrupts that clarity isn't harmless, it's invasive. You don't need to see something move to know something has shifted. You just need to speak and listen, truly listen, to how your voice responds in that moment. If it bounces back twisted, if it feels like someone else is in the room echoing your words, you don't need validation. You need to act. And I'll tell you something. This is exactly why powerful people protect their voices. Why they guard their words. Because when you speak from truth, from presence, you alter the room. But when your voice starts getting hijacked, dampened, silenced, that's spiritual warfare. That's energy trying to reclaim what you've earned, what you've built. That's a witch trying to move in through distortion. And sometimes, it's not even about what you hear. It's about what you don't. You speak and the room feels dead, flat, like your words went out and hit a wall. That absence of resonance, that is just as powerful a message. Because sound should bounce. It should fill a space. When it doesn't, that space is already occupied. And you better believe that presence is watching how you handle it. Do you speak louder? Do you pause? Do you leave? Because your reaction tells that force everything it needs to know about your spiritual posture. If you get scared, it digs in deeper. If you freeze, it wraps tighter. But if you shift your stance, if you raise your presence, if you reclaim your frequency with force, it has no room to stay. Because spiritual energy isn't polite. It doesn't wait for permission. It looks for invitation, and silence is an invitation. So don't give it silence. Don't give it uncertainty. Speak. Speak with fire. Speak with command. Because your voice isn't just for conversation. It's for confrontation. When energy is trying to manipulate your space, you don't whisper. You don't step back. You call it out. You change the frequency of that room with your authority. And you don't stop until that distortion is gone. But let's go even deeper. Let's talk about the emotional distortion that comes when your voice has been spiritually weakened. You start doubting what you say. You hesitate to speak truth. You lower your tone. You censor your language. Not because you're unsure, but because something in you feels watched. You can't quite put your finger on it, but the confidence, the natural clarity, it's gone. That's not burnout. That's energetic sabotage, and that happens when a witch-like force has been lingering too long, feeding on your expression, suppressing your command, and you didn't notice it until you did. You think this is just about weird echoes. No, this is about your identity, your sovereignty, because when you lose your voice, when you lose the resonance of your own presence, you're not just silenced, you're made small, and the moment you're small, you're easy to influence, easy to shape, easy to control. That's why awareness is not optional. That's why presence isn't just some trendy concept. It's survival, because the most dangerous manipulation doesn't come through screams. It comes through whispers, through silence, through sound that returns to you bent just enough to confuse your senses. That's why you have to know your voice. Know its strength. Know when it's being played with. Because when you know what your truth sounds like, you immediately recognize when it's been touched. So next time you speak and something in the air feels wrong, don't skip past it. Don't dismiss it. Stand up. Get centered. Speak again. Louder, stronger. Reclaim the room, force that distortion to either retreat or reveal itself. Because what you tolerate grows. And you are not here to tolerate spiritual confusion. You are here to command clarity. You are here to protect your power. And no echo, no interference, no presence has the right to alter your truth without facing the full weight of your awareness. Your voice is a weapon. Your presence is a force. And the next time something tries to interrupt either, don't just notice it. Answer it. There's a kind of silence that isn't peaceful. It doesn't feel calm or still or safe. It feels off, like the air just got thicker, like the walls leaned in a little closer, like something in the atmosphere pulled back, waiting, watching. And you don't know why, but your breath suddenly sounds too loud. Your own heartbeat echoes in your ears. You freeze, not from fear, but from instinct. That's not relaxation. That's not solitude. That's spiritual warning. When everything goes quiet all at once, and it feels like the world just hit mute, that's not nature taking a break. That's something unnatural taking over. People don't talk about that kind of silence because it doesn't make sense to them. We're so conditioned to see silence as a good thing, as rest, as peace. But there's a difference between silence you choose and silence that's imposed on you. When the birds stop singing, when the wind stops moving, when even your thoughts seem like they're getting drowned out. That's not your environment giving you space. That's your environment being overpowered by something stronger, something darker, something that wants to claim spiritual control. When a witch is near, when a spiritual parasite enters your field, it doesn't always bring chaos with it. Sometimes it brings stillness, heavy, unnatural stillness, not because it's trying to scare you, because it's trying to see if you notice. It's waiting to see if you're turned in, if your spirit is awake, if you've been paying attention to the signs, or if you've been too distracted by the noise of your life to notice when everything stops around you. And that's the moment of truth. Because the second you feel that shift, your nervous system reacts. You stand a little straighter. You look over your shoulder. Your breath tightens. That's your body sounding the alarm your brain hasn't caught up to yet. And the worst thing you can do in that moment is ignore it. Because that silence isn't empty. It's full. It's pulsing. It's thick with energy that doesn't belong to you. It's filled with the presence of something that shouldn't be there. But is. That's how these spiritual forces work. They don't need to scream. They don't need to attack. They just need you to ignore the moment when the atmosphere shifts. Because once you ignore it, they get permission to stay. They start planting thoughts, seeding emotions, draining your clarity. All because you didn't respond when the room went dead silent and your instinct said, "Something is wrong." And I don't care how logical or grounded or educated you think you are. When that silence hits you, when everything stops for no reason, your job is not to explain it. Your job is to own the space, to disrupt the stillness, to speak into it, to walk with authority into that moment and declare that whatever is present has no place there. Because energy moves by permission. If you don't resist it, you're already giving it access. People forget that silence is one of the most powerful tools in any spiritual attack. Not noise, not chaos, silence, because it isolates you, makes you doubt, makes you shrink. It convinces you that nothing's wrong so that it can root deeper, so that it can blend in and become part of the space without ever being confronted. That's not just creepy. That's strategic. So when you walk into a place and everything suddenly feels too quiet, stop. Don't just keep moving like it's nothing. Ground yourself. Breathe. Test the atmosphere. Speak. Move something. Do not let that silence go unchallenged, because that's your moment to disrupt the plan, to break the spell, to declare your authority over that space before it takes root. You are not just a body walking into a room. You're an energy, a frequency, a force, and anything that silences a space around you is trying to overpower your field, trying to make you small before you even realize what's happening. Don't give it that opening. Don't let that silence become your surrender. When the air gets heavy and the world goes quiet, don't you dare shrink. You stand taller. You speak louder. You fill the room with presence, your presence, because the louder your energy becomes, the faster darkness retreats. Before your eyes register it, before your ears fully hear it, your intuition already knows. That tightness in your chest, that prickle at the back of your neck, the way your stomach flips for no logical reason. You don't have words for it, but your entire body is saying something isn't right. And what do most people do in that moment? They override it. They rationalize. They talk themselves out of it, because logic has been trained to dominate instinct. But the truth is, intuition is your first alarm. It's your most ancient weapon. It's the part of you that was built for survival, not approval. And when a witch is near, when something spiritual and sinister starts encroaching on your energy, intuition always fires first. People ask, how do I protect myself? You start by listening, not to the noise, not to the outside, but to that voice inside that doesn't speak in words. It speaks in signals. It speaks in reactions, in discomfort, in sudden fatigue, in an overwhelming urge to leave a room, even if everything in that room looks perfectly fine. That's not weakness. That's intelligence. That's spiritual awareness. But we've been conditioned to call it paranoia, to dismiss it, to question it until we're too far in to turn back. But I'll tell you something. When something is watching you, when something has its eye on your spirit and is testing for weakness, it doesn't start by attacking your body. It attacks your clarity. It tries to disrupt your discernment. It wants you to believe that gut instinct is just fear, that you're just being dramatic, that you should stay quiet and keep going. And if you buy into that, if you talk yourself out of what your body already knows, you give that presence exactly what it came for: access. Because that's what dark energy wants. It wants your awareness dulled, your guard lowered, your inner knowing silenced, and the more you ignore those internal nudges, the more you separate from your power. People think intuition is this soft, gentle whisper. Sometimes, yes, but other times it's a full-body jolt, a wave of anxiety with no name, a pressure that doesn't let up. That's not your nerves. That's your spirit telling you, wake up, look closer, something's here. And you don't need to see it to believe it. You just need to honor what you feel. That's where your power lies. Not in waiting for proof. Not in needing someone else to validate what you're sensing. Your intuition doesn't need agreement. It needs action. It needs respect. Because it's always trying to protect you. And every time you choose logic over instinct in the face of spiritual warning, you weaken the very system designed to keep you safe. You think every time something dark enters your space it'll come with flashing signs. No, it's subtle, it's strategic, it wants to blend in. And your intuition is the only part of you fast enough to catch it in the act. That moment when you feel your energy drop around someone for no reason, that moment when a place looks clean but feels heavy, That's your chance to act. To shield up. To speak up. To remove yourself. Because your body is picking up what your eyes can't see. That's your real armor. There is a war happening around you that's not always physical. It's energetic, and in that space, awareness is everything. You don't have to wait for bells to ring or shadows to fall. When your spirit senses danger, your only job is to listen and respond, not later. Now. That is your line of defense. That's what separates the people who fall into darkness from the ones who walk straight through it untouched. You don't need permission to trust yourself. You don't need proof to protect your space. And you sure as hell don't need anyone to believe you before you act. Because when a witch is near, when energy starts to press in with force and falsehood, intuition is your siren. It doesn't always make sense. It's not supposed to. It's not about logic. It's about survival. And if you don't honor it, if you train yourself to ignore the very thing built to guide you, you are handing your power over before the fight even begins. You want to be untouchable. Start by being unshakable in what you feel. Trust it like your life depends on it. Because sometimes it does. Have you ever felt like the same negative pattern keeps circling back into your life, no matter how much you heal, how much you grow, how far you distance yourself from toxic people? Like something unseen keeps looping you back into the same fear, the same failure, the same emotional trap. You think it's coincidence. You think it's just life. But it's not. It's a spiritual pattern, and patterns like that don't repeat by accident. They repeat because something is feeding off of them. Something wants you distracted, drained, repeating. Because the more you repeat a cycle unconsciously, the more power you lose without ever realizing it. That's what happens when you ignore the signs. That's what happens when something dark anchors itself to your energy through emotional loops. You're not just dealing with random life events anymore. You're dealing with attachments, spiritual intrusions that survive off your emotional energy, especially your fear, especially your wounds, especially the stories you keep repeating to yourself when no one else is around to hear them. That's where a witch works. Not out in the open, but in the quiet crevices of your thinking. We don't talk about spiritual warfare in everyday life, but it's happening all the time. And when you find yourself stuck in the same emotional feedback loop, depression that won't lift, anger that keeps returning, shame that shows up even when you've done nothing wrong, you have to ask yourself, what keeps pulling me back here? Because when something is feeding on your emotional reactions, it will do everything it can to keep reactivating that same wound. That's not just pain. That's targeting. And here's the truth most people won't say out loud. When a witch is near, when spiritual manipulation enters your space, it doesn't always come with spells or symbols or candles. Sometimes it comes with triggers. With conflict that doesn't make sense. With memories you thought were healed suddenly flooding back without warning. And if you're not aware, you'll think you're broken. You'll think you're weak. But you're not. You're being tested, energetically, emotionally, spiritually. Dark energy survives on chaos, on confusion, on your inability to step back and see the bigger picture. It thrives when you keep reacting the same way, when you keep doubting yourself, when you fall back into shame, guilt, or hopelessness. That's how it stays alive, through your lack of awareness. And as long as you ignore those patterns, as long as you convince yourself that it's all just random, you're playing right into it. You're giving it permission to stay. So how do you break it? You disrupt the pattern. You stop feeding it. You stop responding in the way it expects. You get radically honest with yourself about where these cycles started, and you cut the energetic cord at the source. You stop blaming the people, the places, the circumstances, and you go straight to the energy behind it all. You stop asking, why does this keep happening to me? And you start asking, what am I being pulled into that no longer belongs to me? Because once you shift that question, you shift your power. You step out of victim energy and into command. You start closing doors that were never meant to be open. You start recognizing the signs, not as coincidences, but as calls to wake up. You stop ignoring that subtle whisper inside you that says, you've been here before, and it's time to leave. The moment you see the pattern, you have a choice. You can keep repeating it and stay spiritually bound, or you can break it and reclaim what was yours all along, the strength, the clarity, the peace. But it won't come if you keep falling for the trap. It won't come if you keep letting your wounds run the show. You want to win this battle. You've got to face the pattern head on and tell it, you don't get to live here anymore. Not in my mind, not in my emotions, not in my space. Because the moment you stop reacting automatically, the moment you pause, breathe, reflect, and respond with intention instead of emotion, you sever the cord. You strip the witch of her power. You silence the manipulation, and you reclaim the cycle as your own. That's how you take your power back, not just spiritually, but emotionally, mentally, energetically. And when that happens, nothing dark can hold you. Not again, not ever. So now you know, these sounds, these signals, these shifts in energy are not just background noise. They are warnings. They are alerts. They are your call to rise. You were never meant to walk through this world asleep at the wheel. You were built to be sharp, disciplined, spiritually awake, whether it comes through whispers in the wind, footsteps in the silence, or a sudden chill that stops you mid-step. Your body, your spirit, your intuition is speaking. And the moment you start honoring that language, the moment you stop doubting what you feel, you become untouchable. This world is full of distractions that pull your power away little by little. But the people who win, truly win, are the ones who listen deeper. The ones who don't need proof to protect their peace. The ones who don't wait until it's too late to recognize a threat. Be that person. Trust your knowing. Trust the signs. Because when a witch is near, the signs won't scream, they'll whisper. And only the disciplined, only the grounded, only the spiritually awake will hear them and move. The war isn't coming, it's already here. The question is, are you listening?